My name is Jonathan Gillum.
And this is The Experts. This is Jonathan Gillum, and this is a special Sunday night edition of The Experts on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And hopefully we'll get some big numbers tonight, because I'm not going to stay in here too long, but I do want to talk about the reality of what Media Matters is actually about, and the two key figures in Media Matters, and how they have really little to do with media and more to do with the deep state. Now, I've been a victim of Media Matters and their fake reporting before, and how they use sound bites to tell whatever they want to say instead of actually playing the entire interview and showing exactly what we were talking about. They don't do that. They'll take snippets. They'll start rumors. They do everything that they accuse people like Sean Hannity of doing, when Sean Hannity and the people that he uses to dig into stories are people like me, who have real experience and real expertise. So let's go ahead and start it right now. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. So this is a warning order for today, okay? Let's talk real quick about the deep state, and I'm going to bring up a couple of names here just from the past couple of days that have to do with things that I find are very, very odd when it comes to generals in the military, for instance, and when it comes to timing of how people like these weirdos from Media Matters, how they spin things up like they do. Now, real quick, I tweeted out late yesterday night, because I saw something in the news that really made me pause, and that was that General John, I think you say his last name, Hyten, H-Y-T-E-N, he is head of the basically the nuclear missile program. He's the guy that who actually, let me see, he's the top U.S. nuclear commander. He said Saturday, in front of a group of people in the press, okay, he was talking to the press, he would resist President Donald Trump if he ordered an illegal launch of nuclear weapons. He's the commander of the U.S. Strategic Command, STRATCOM, told an audience at the Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada. Okay, so first and foremost, this idiot, this subversive criminal, this general who was put into place by Obama, is talking about things in a foreign country in a public forum about an international security forum in Nova Scotia, Canada. And he's going there and spouting off about something that, true or not, and I know as soon as I tweeted this, I knew this was going to come out. People were saying, how can you, the general says is just saying what's true, that if the president gives an illegal order, he's not going to do it. Okay, listen, there's set ways in which the DOD and the president of the United States work together before a nuclear strike. Those things are set in stone. The standards are set in stone. Now, for a general to come out into a public forum in another country and to say what this guy said, to me, is about as treasonous as can be. This is such backstabbing bullcrap. I am shocked when I heard this that there was no immediate repercussions. Stanley McChrystal was fired from his job because he gave an interview to the Rolling Stones in Afghanistan when Obama was in office, and they wrote a few things. I can't remember exact quote that he said, but it was nothing super spectacular. But again, I don't think McChrystal should have given that interview to begin with. That's not generals' jobs. Generals should be so far removed from the public and the press that they can't. It'd be like trying to find something at the bottom of the ocean. They should not be anywhere on Facebook, Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. They shouldn't be talking to the press. They shouldn't be doing interviews. So, did I agree with McChrystal being fired? I don't know. I don't know McChrystal. He gets a lot of praise, but I have doubts with all these generals. But let's say he was a great general. He was doing a great job over there, which, you know, we've lost, we are not lost completely, but we floundered in Afghanistan and in Iraq. We haven't stopped the enemy. So I can't say McChrystal is the greatest general of all times. He's no World War II general that would have stomped whoever they said go get him. So, of course, a lot of that's because of constraints, I'm sure. But, however, he shouldn't have given that interview. He was fired by Obama. He was given an interview that was not giving away any type of strategic type of conversations that he had with the president. This general goes out and gives this statement as though he is the commander-in-chief that's going to tell our president what to do. Secondly, he's going into a foreign country and saying things about the conversations that he's having with our president in a public forum about highly classified things that are going to happen in the case of a nuclear attack. Not only is it outrageous, but it gives us a great picture of the reality of these people to upper echelon to the DOD. Just like last year, we saw a tremendous picture of who these people are on the Democratic side and the establishment members on the Republican side, and how they wage war against each other, yet when it comes down to it, they don't really do anything to jeopardize their own position. So they will only go against a person in another party as long as it's not going to jeopardize them by them turning around and accusing them of the same thing. Why do you think Al Franken is not being destroyed in the Senate right now? Well, that's by and large because I would say a lot of those people in there know that if they brought up a stink against Al Franken, that other women will probably come out against other senators, and even if it's not somebody that did it, they know that if they go full bore against Al Franken, that when those people come out against these other people, they're going to lose a seat in the Senate or Congress. So they don't come out against this stuff, right? We saw the beginnings of this, not the beginnings, but the shapings of this, how this stuff works. We saw the true faces of all these people in the presidential election last year and the campaign process. We're seeing it with the DOD. We saw it how Barack Obama, Susan Rice, Loretta Lynch, the woman from the DOD, Susan Power, I think her name's Susan Power, and she was an ambassador that was attached to DOD or something. I don't even know how she was involved with this nonsense. We see with Clapper, we see with John Brennan, all these individuals, how they all from that upper echelon have worked together to do these different things, and how they undermine anybody that stands in their way or anybody that is not a part of their little subversive group. So I saw this at the same time I saw that Media Matters is ginning up this campaign again against Sean Hannity, of who I'm on his show every Thursday. I'm going to be hosting his show this Wednesday. So, and every time I host, Media Matters goes and they grab a soundbite of something that I'm saying. I think the last one had to do with the fact that I said that well, there was two, the last two times I hosted. One was that I said feminists are communist subversive, that the feminist movement is a communist subversive movement. That's true. There's no doubting about it. You look at the people who started it. You look at the people that are at the top of it. You look at what their whole goal is. They work in conjunction with all these other activist groups. There's no doubt about it. The other thing they came on about me was when I said that the girl who got killed in Virginia when she got ran over by the white supremacists, and she was out there protesting with Antifa. She had Antifa stuff on her Facebook page and so on and so forth. How I said that was on her, that she had marched with a terrorist group, and she ended up in the middle of a conflict between a white supremacist and an anarchy group or a fascist group. They say they're anti-fascist. They're really fascist. They're communists. And she got killed. And that was really a question of personal responsibility of out there marching with these people. Of course, what they make it sound like in the way they write the story and the way they cut out the little sound bites is it was as if I was some kind of supporter of the people that were out there, the white supremacists and the white nationalists or whatever these weirdos call themselves. And that couldn't have been any further from the truth and anything further from the conversation. Now, they have done this, I don't know, I've been on Media Matters platform, I don't know how many times, and I was on there probably a lot more when I was on Fox News, but every time I host Hannity, they'll gin up something because they're troublemakers. Why did I start off talking about the DOD in this subversive group and then now Media Matters? That's because you have to see the link that these people and how that these people have and how they work together. You have the DOD people, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, all these intelligence analysts or agencies. You got, I would say even the VA, all these different groups, right? All these different agencies. You got people that work in the White House, people that work in the State Department. The State Department as a whole is a completely socialist, and I'm only using that because I'm being nice, communist-ran organization. You even have local mayors like de Blasio here in New York City, who's a communist. You have Ron Emanuel in Chicago. That guy is a closet communist, just like Hillary Clinton, a student of Saul Alinsky. So what you have here, when you look at these people, whether it's the DOD or you're looking at these media people like Media Matters, what you're looking at is, as I've always been explaining, a family tree of subversives. Now, this didn't start last year. It didn't start with Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. It didn't even start with Bill Clinton. It didn't even start with George Bush 41. It didn't start with Jimmy Carter. These types of subversive groups have been in this country growing in the long game. They play the long game, and they've been playing this game in many different ways since I assume the early 1900s. In the 1960s, they grew to extreme prominence because at that point they started taking overt action where you had the Weather Underground, the Black Panthers, all these other groups whose founding members are Marxists, communists. Then they went into the educational sector as well, starting in Harvard and Columbia and moving their way into the Ivy League schools and then down all the way now into your elementary schools. They went into Hollywood. They went into, do you think McCarthy was so crazy back in I think it was the 50s when he was looking for these people? I mean, he was it sounded like he was a tyrant for sure, but it's not like he was going after people just who he randomly picked out and said, you're a communist. He had a set of standards that he was looking for because, from what I gather, studying about McCarthy, he understood communism. You also had J. Edgar Hoover. And it's interesting because when I was in the FBI, we got this long brief about how bad J. Edgar Hoover was and all these open files that he kept on. And here's the thing about the groups that he kept these files on. Hollywood, black separatists, which is a Marxist group. You had the gay movement, which was basically started by a communist group and Marxists, and so on and so forth. All the people that he was looking at, Hollywood, they're all steeped in Marxist and communist ideologies. Now, I'm not saying that J. Edgar Hoover was right in everything that he did and the way he did it. I'm not saying that McCarthy was right in everything he did and the way that he did it. But what I am saying is that there were clues at that point as to who we would be fighting today. And I can't help but think in a lot of the ways what kept those guys from going even further is the fact that already at that point in time, there were closet communists in government, in media, in Hollywood, in schools, and it was starting to grow further and further. So there were hints along the way as to what would happen. Now, when we look at, again, the DOD and then we look at Media Matters, another thing I'm starting to realize, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Media Matters in particular in just a minute, because they really do stand out when you look at basically the founder and the henchman of Media Matters. David Brock basically founded Media Matters, and Angelo, I think I'm saying his name right, Carusone, he is like the henchman. And he graduated, he was in his junior year in 2009, so I guess maybe 2010 he graduated law school. And he has been kind of this individual from Media Matters that identifies specific power players in the conservative media to go after. And they figured out a long time ago how to do this, how to go out. Now, I don't know if they figured it out. I haven't done enough research on this. I have to do more. I was researching Media Matters themselves, but the tactics that they're using, I don't know how far back these go. But basically, this is what they're doing. And I want you to pay close attention how I'm going to connect these dots, okay? I talked about the DOD, starting off in all these federal agencies, and how they've all been subverted, how the Department of Education is huge in this, and how all these schools and colleges have been subverted, how all these different mayors and governors, city officials, judges have all been subverted. It's not that they've been subverted. It's what they grew up believing, and they subverted their positions. I talked about Media Matters and how they subvert, how they are actually operatives of this same movement. But here's something that I started to discover, is that the key tactic that Media Matters is using is that they go after the advertisers. And they try to get the advertisers to stop sponsoring whatever show or host it is that they want to crush. Now, what happens when they do that? The shows quickly run out of money, and there's nothing that's going to get a show canceled faster than when they run out of money. So, like Glenn Beck, for instance, Glenn Beck, although I think Glenn, I have my opinions about Glenn. I don't really particularly care for what he does now. Glenn Beck, at one point when he was at Fox News, I think had the greatest news show, one of the greatest news shows that has ever been. I think that the way he was doing it when he was on Fox News was spectacular, even though I had my interactions with him, and I think he's crazy. And I think he's another one of these narcissistic fake people. I think what happened with Glenn Beck was that at first it was a shtick. At first it was something that he was good at, and so he ran with the ball. But I think what happened with Glenn Beck was he got indoctrinated by fire. He started having people threaten his life. He had real cases opened up in the FBI of people threatening his life. He had people doing deep research, which, as he found out, shocked him. And I think Glenn Beck became a believer. I think Glenn Beck then went off the deep end another way, but not fully of his own accord. You had people like Media Matters and this Angelo character and David Brock, who were specifically targeting his sponsors in order to get him and his show diminished. But Glenn pulled a fast one and went and did his own thing and started the blaze. And it was great at first. Unfortunately, it crashed because of Glenn Beck. So that's an unfortunate circumstance. But what he was facing was this onslaught by Media Matters. This was in 2009, 2000 up and through 2010 when I met Glenn Beck. So, and I won't go into the story of how I met him and stuff, but I did have interaction with Glenn Beck when I was in the FBI. So, interesting when we look at this tactic of going after the sponsors. And the reasoning behind that, which I'll talk about in a second, is totally fake. And they try to make it sound like they're doing something honorable, but they're not. It's a complete hit job on anything conservative or constitutional in this country. That's it. I like to get away from the words conservative and liberal and focus more on just what's effective in this country. Remember, communist subversives don't want you doing what's effective, because what's effective threatens their ability to manipulate the country. So that's why nothing's ever really fixed, because they don't want it to be fixed. They want to be able to manipulate these things. So here's the linchpin. Let me see how many people are watching here, okay? On Facebook, we got about I don't know, we got about almost 200 on Twitter. We got about 50 something. Here's what I want y'all. I don't even know what we have on YouTube. I never even check it. 21 people. YouTube is a joke. So here's what I want you all to do right now. Share this show. If you haven't retweeted it on Twitter, do that right now. Just hit the retweet button. If you haven't shared it on Facebook, which I haven't even done that, make sure that you share it, because I'm going to tell you something right now. And I want you to think about this, because nobody's really talking about this so much, and I want to point this out. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to copy the link, and I'm going to go over here to my personal page, and I'm going to share that. And then I got 2 other pages. I'll share that real quick. Hold on 1 second. Boom, boom, shared. Go here, share this. So make sure you're retweeting it on Twitter and sharing it on Facebook. And stand by, because I'm going to give you the linchpin now of all this stuff here, and why it's so easy for them to get rid of these different advertisers. Boom, all shared. And I'm going to go to Twitter, and I'm going to retweet it. Stand by. So we're on Twitter, and the show is there, and I'm going to hit retweet. Boom, retweet. Look at that. Pow. Okay. Now, here's what I want. Hannah Marie, you're going to get blocked here in a minute, so you might as well just check out. I don't know you, and I'm not going to spend my time thinking about you right now. So H1029, I'll block you in just a second. So here's what I want you all. I want you all to check out right now. Okay, so I'll go ahead and block her. Stand by. Let's see. So here's the linchpin in all this. Do you honestly think that Media Matters is powerful enough to just go after any of these advertisers and get them to say no more? We're not going to do it anymore. We're not going to back Sean Hannity, or we're not going to back, as it was the case, Glenn Beck. Do you think that Media Matters just is acting on their own and just has that power? If you do, you're a fool. Because here's the deal. Just like the DOD and what we saw with the ambassador, the former ambassador that was in the DOD that was unmasking people for the Obama administration for this Russia probe, just like any of these different groups, like this general that I just talked about a minute ago that's in control of the nuclear program or the nuclear weapons, saying that he would disobey the president, saying this in a public forum. When you look at how all the different intel political appointees and the senior executive officers from the DOJ and the FBI and the DOD, how all these people seem to be in the same mindset. It's as if they're getting a daily report on how they should act and what they should say. Well, it's not quite that way, but it's very close. It's very close. And so what I want you to understand here is that it's the same with Media Matters and these different sponsors. Media Matters is reaching out, and I learned this from USAA. The general that's at the top of USAA is a general that was put into place by Barack Obama. That was before he went to USAA and became the CEO of USAA. So there's been times when certain individuals were being attacked by Media Matters, and they were going to their sponsors and saying, you must stop advertising on this show. And lo and behold, USAA would be one of those people. So here's the very interesting part of this thing that I'm seeing, this equation that people aren't getting. Just like all these other groups have been subverted, whether it's the DOD, whether it's Austin, the city council in Austin or Dallas, whether it's Chicago or New York, whether it is the agencies where you got all these people at the top of all these agencies that are political holdovers from the Obama administration that are part of the deep state. They have done the same thing when it comes to advertisers. And what they have done is that they have gotten people into positions as CEOs and top directors in these different high money companies. So, and I know this sounds conspiratorial, but I don't think it is conspiratorial. You can look at who they gave their money to in the election process, and you can see that these CEOs and the head of marketing and all these things that can throw these numbers around to the CEOs that aren't involved with this, and they can basically touch base with Media Matters. Media Matters says, no, you need to stop advertising, and they'll just stop advertising. They'll give an excuse. They'll say this or they'll say that. But ultimately what they're doing is they're all working in coordination together. That's my take on this. I do believe that there is a coordination with the same centralized subversive planning, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know exactly what it is at this point in time. We'll find out. But the same ones that are directing how the executives at the top of the DOD and the DOJ and the FBI and all the intel communities and then the White House, yes, all those people that Reince Priebus did not fire and that Jim Kelly still has not fired, that work in the White House, that worked during the Obama administration, even those people. These top executives in advertising or in these different sponsors for different conservative TV shows, I can guarantee you they have specifically targeted those people to go after them so that they can get those positions, either put people in those positions or they can put influence on them and around them in order to do what they think. That's how they're able to do this so quickly. Now, let's go to the A block, and I'm going to focus a little bit more specifically about Media Matters. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it. All right. Media Matters. Let's bring up a couple things here. Starting today with what was on CNN today. Let's see here. We had the spinning wheel of death there for a second. Okay, here's Look at this first of all. This is Angelo. I think I'm saying his name like Carusone. And he was on Brian Stelter's show today. Now, I've talked a lot about Brian Stelter before. This weirdo right here, who has, when we went over, there was a show that I did specifically about him. When I was a CNN contributor, he was one of the most unprofessional people I saw there. He was an entertainment reporter, and somehow now he's become this incredible, inside journalist with all the answers. And I forgot the name of his show. It'll come up here in just a second. This guy is the biggest BS artist I've ever seen. I remember sitting next to him on the set with Harry Houck, I believe was an NYPD detective. And this knucklehead was in shorts sitting over on the edge, eating cereal in the break, so it's all ringing in our ears as he's smacking his food like a little baby. Talks just like a little baby as well. And I just kept thinking to myself, you have me, I'm sitting here, having been a SEAL, having been a cop, an air marshal, an FBI special agent. I've done all these things, right? They're asking me questions specifically. I think it had to do with, it was either the downing of the Malaysian plane that disappeared, or it had to do with the New York State prison jailbreak. It was one of those two things. I can't remember which one it was. And I kept thinking to myself, it must have been the prison break. So here I am, sitting on here being asked serious questions about this and responding with my training, experience, and understanding, the three things that make up wisdom, and giving my opinion on this. Next to me was Harry Houck, this former Marine, retired detective, homicide detective from the NYPD, sitting next to me talking about the same stuff. And then next to him was this guy. eating cereal, wearing shorts, with zero experience in anything, but more than happy to pontificate and give his insight into what he felt about whatever the situation was. It was the weirdest. It was one of those things that I'll forever keep in my memory bank as to why I consistently do the things that I do, so that I have legitimacy, because I don't want to end up like this. So on this idiot show today, you had this. Stand by here. And it disappeared. Hold on. We don't want that guy back. Yes. Let's see here. Stand by. I want to bring up the sound. Here it is. I'm going to bring up the sound of this from today so we can do what we did the other day with Hillary Clinton. We can go through here and actually listen to what was being said. Stand by here. There it goes. I have a feeling we're going to have to suffer through a commercial.
Nothing is more powerful.
Which I don't ever give sponsors anything on here, so we'll just move that for a second while we get through with this commercial. All right, here we go.
You announced it several months ago. Have you succeeded in peeling off any advertisers?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we have statements from 30 companies that are program.
But were they advertising to begin with?
All right, here we
Angelo,
go.
what's the status of this ad boycott? You announced it several months ago. Have you succeeded in peeling off any advertisers?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we have statements from 30 companies that have committed that they're not going to advertise on Sean Hannity's program.
But were they advertising to begin with?
All of those companies were actually advertising to begin with, and then there are many more companies that never started in the first place because they say this is too volatile, there's too much potential controversy associated.
Okay, so what he's saying is that they have gotten 33 sponsors to either, he doesn't give the specific numbers of what here. He said some of the sponsors were already on there and committed not to sponsor Sean Hannity anymore. And then he's had a few others, although I would imagine it's the other way around, who say that they won't sponsor Sean Hannity's show. So this is a typical type of lie that a propagandist like this would actually perform, because what they can do is, without showing the numbers, because you're not, the average person, not only are you not going to be able to get the numbers, most people are not, you're just going to take it for for granted because it's face value because it's on CNN. So I'm talking about the people who are the useful idiots that Saul Alinsky talked about, and that Marx and all the other communist people always talked about. So this guy. And remember, again, just because you might be liberal, I'm not calling you an idiot. I'm saying if you listen to this, you're an idiot, okay? So if you take this stuff without researching it, you're an idiot. Same thing with Fox News. I research everything. I don't care who the people are on there. As a news junkie, I make sure that I investigate whatever these people are saying, because as I was talking about a minute ago with this guy, with Brian Stelter, I've had to sit there and watch somebody many times that has zero experience put themselves on the same level as me. It's there's plenty of others I could go into, but right now we'll just talk about this. So right off the bat, this guy is full of baloney, because he's going to make it sound as though he is so successful at keeping people from sponsoring the Sean Hannity show, radio and TV both. But what I'm really understanding with this guy right here, as I see this, is first and foremost, I can almost guarantee you any of these sponsors that have decided not to sponsor, whether it be Glenn Beck back in the day or Bill O'Reilly or Sean Hannity, any of these people from Fox News, what they're doing is, like I said a second ago, I can guarantee you can investigate this and there's going to be connections. There's going to be connections between Media Matters and those CEOs already, or those companies already. So it's not like they said, they reached out to him and said, we have proof, this is unethical, it's going to get worse. We're asking you as a moral obligation to not sponsor these people. What they're doing is they're calling up the phone and saying, yep, it's time, pull the coverage. That's how this works. These people are all connected. This isn't a real boycott of ethics and morals. Please do not believe that's the case, because this guy has neither morals or ethics, and I can guarantee you that this is what's actually happening here.
And I think we've already seen the financial effects. In September alone, even before the latest flare-up, Fox News' ad revenue was down 17%, which is rather atypical for the market as a whole, and it very much dovetails.
So that, in large part, is probably not because of Sean Hannity or anything that any one particular person did, but the fact that Roger Ailes was gone, that there were several sexual harassment cases, that you had people leaving and quitting and being fired and things changing. And so the ad revenue was just down because nobody knew what to do, how to advertise. Has nothing to do with Media Matters whatsoever. Nothing. So funny.
With the massive exodus of advertisers in the first wave in August.
Hannity says he's against
Exactly. The first wave in August is all that stuff was happening, and people said it wasn't Sean Hannity, it was Fox News. It was Fox and all the things that were going on with Roger Ailes as he departed, and the takeover of Rupert Murdoch and his sons, and how they're maneuvering to get stuff done, and they got Richard Fowler and Meghan McCain on there way too much. That was the problem. So sponsors are just maneuvering. It has nothing to do with Media Matters. They're making themselves out to be way more important than they really are.
Boycott. Why do you think it's appropriate to try to take away any commentators' advertisers?
I don't like it at all.
Okay, let's hear that question again.
Hannity says he's against any ad boycott. Why do you think it's appropriate to try to take away any commentators' advertisers?
I don't like it at all.
Then why?
Liar. This guy is, not only is he a bad liar, he's an attorney, so you know that he's a trained liar, but still he gives off certain characteristics, as we studied in statement analysis in the FBI. He's given off certain characteristics that he's lying all the way through this. In his specific questions, he's tremendously lying. Plus, the fact is, all these questions are predetermined before they even come on. So Brian Stelter and they know exactly what they're going to ask, because the bookers will reach out. Either the bookers will do it where they'll reach out and they'll give them questions, or they'll go back and forth saying, this is what I want you to ask, or this is what I'll talk about. And then in the case of something this important where CNN is integral in this, you think Media Matters doing this by themselves or not, CNN and the Democratic Party and all these people are intricate players in this whole thing, because Sean Hannity loses advertisers. That means CNN and MSNBC will gain advertisers. So, of course, they're going to be a part of this. Whoop, where do we go there?
Well, because I think at some point you are forced to do it, right? Because I think
most
commentators work
out of morality,
and those companies have guidelines and policies and procedures that they force and have and police themselves. They have their own commentators adhere to a standard. No other network would let their personalities go out there and do the kinds of destructive and reckless things that Sean Hannity does. Except
for maybe the network that he's sitting on right here, that is a lie after a lie after a lie. I've been on set before when a white cop shot a black guy who had a knife and stabbed the window of a cop car, was threatening people, stabbed tires out of cars, was running through a neighborhood that was packed with people, and then the cops ended up shooting the guy 16 times until he died. Because whatever, I guess, I don't know. He still had the, I mean, I did all the analysis of it. The guy still had the knife in his hand. He was still moving. Once the cop committed to shooting and to eliminate the threat, he kept shooting until the guy was dead. He reloaded his weapon and trained his gun on him. And I watched CNN lie about this, saying that when I say lie, they outwardly would say things like, he reloaded his weapon to start firing again, but his partner stopped him. Well, they don't know that. I mean, the guy, first of all, even if the guy did start shooting again, if the guy still has a knife in his hand, I guess he can still do it. You can't overkill somebody. But the fact is, that's what you're trained to do. You don't let your weapon go dry and then not reload it. So this guy reloaded and then trained his weapon back on it, on the target. They do things like this all the time, whether it's about President Trump or they're talking about a guy who's running around attempting to stab people. CNN will lie about it if it's a black guy that got shot and a white cop that shot him. That's how racist this network is, and that's how much they skew things. I know, I've been there. I'm not spinning anything at all. I'm telling the absolute truth. I've sat there and watched people talk amongst each other that were reporters and trusted people with CNN discuss how much they hate the presidential candidate. These are supposed to be people that are somewhat unbiased because they're in the news, but then turn around and present themselves on TV as a real journalist, but behind the scenes they are complete bias. And then I've seen it the other way around, where they don't want to say personally what their opinion is, but they get on TV and it's a big acting game where they're slamming the president. So they do the same thing with Fox News. It's CNN and MSNBC and Media Matters and the Washington Post and all these different media outlets are all a part of the same inner circle. They're all a part of it with all these political appointees in the government, all these heads of agencies, these senior executive service people like McCabe and the FBI. You got Hollywood, all part of all the same thing. Let's continue to listen to this.
But when you're faced with an entity that doesn't have any accountability, you have two choices: do nothing and continue to endure the destructive consequences of it, or appeal to a higher power. In this case, it's the...
Okay, so first of all, he's saying that the people that watch Fox News have no brain, because he's saying that there's no accountability. Like Sean Hannity could just say whatever he wants, and nobody's going to do anything about it. I can guarantee you she would never do this, because I know Sean is a great guy. He would never come out and say something racist or sexist, but according to this guy, it's unchecked. Fox News can say whatever they want, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it, so you must appeal to a higher power. And this is the guy who's deeming himself the angel of higher power. This weirdo from Media Matters, this liar, this spinster, this subversive, communistic criminal, because if he's anything like David Brock, he's a criminal. David Brock is a known criminal, the way he was running two different, it was actually 3 companies with 2 different, I think they were either PACs or super PACs. It's a long story, but he's a criminal. Thank goodness he had a heart attack.
Advertisers. And I would remind everybody that that was required in the case of Bill O'Reilly. That, you know, Fox News had re-signed his contract and had no intention, even knowing all the things that he had done, of forcing him off the air. It needed to be forced, and I think
they say they do some,
here.
but not all. But with Bill O'Reilly, we saw an immediate advertiser exodus,
yes,
to the point where there weren't enough ads to put in the time slot. We're not seeing that with Hannity. So how successful is this really?
I think that, for me, it's always been a long game. You know, I'm not interested in sort of a short...
Remember, for the keywords of Saul Alinsky and those types of people, these people can't help but use it because they're students of that communist Marxist. Remember that.
Flare up. It is
long when they talk about.
So how successful is this really?
I think that, for me, it's always been a long game. You know, I'm not.
So that's a strategy. Remember that. That's a Marxist strategy. The long game. That's what it is.
Interested in sort of a short burst flare up. It is obviously enormously effective. That's why Sean Hannity is complaining about it. I think it's reflected in their bottom line numbers. I think it is more comparable.
When somebody like this, like Clapper, when Clapper from the CIA, he doesn't look people in the eyes, he's lying. When this guy doesn't look people in the eyes, he's lying because he's trying to think his way through the lie. That's the way it works. If somebody knows the truth and they know exactly what they're saying, they're going to look specifically at the person that they're talking to, unless there's some kind of, I don't know, submissive weirdo. But this guy right here is lying the entire time. He's making this stuff up and he's sticking with a script. That's why there's not the eye contact.
when Glenn Beck left Fox News, that you sort of reach a critical mass of advertisers that don't want to be associated with the program anymore. And as a result of that, the ad rates start to decline. The quality of the advertisers willing to advertise on that program goes down, and it no longer becomes commercially sustainable.
Okay. The point where
so here's what
enough ads to put in the time slot. We're not seeing that with.
Here's what I want you all to see, as I was talking about with the eyes, and I also want you to listen to these tactics. When he's asking him certain questions, he doesn't look at him. He looks down, and his eyes are beady because he's making things up or he's repeating a narrative. But then what he was just saying about ad revenue is true, and they know that. That's the tactic that they use. That's why he has no problem looking this guy in the eyes when he's talking about that. So remember that.
So how successful is this really?
I think that for me, it's always been a long game. You know, I'm not interested in sort of a short burst flare-up. It is obviously enormously effective. That's why Sean Hannity is complaining about it. I think it's reflected in their bottom line numbers. Okay, so you see what he was just saying there? I hope you're seeing this. As he's talking about how effective this is, he will not look at, although I wouldn't look at Stelter in the face anyway because I'd start laughing because he's so ridiculously fake. But he's not looking at him while he's talking about Sean Hannity and how effective this is for his advertisers. That's because he is making this sound much greater than it really is. But watch how when he changes over to talk about the reality of ad revenue and how effective targeting these different sponsors actually is. His eyes go directly to Stelter, and he starts talking to him and feeding him real information. That's one of the ways that we can catch liars in the act. So watch this. Again, watch his face. You know, I'm not interested in sort of a short burst flare-up. It is obviously enormously effective. That's why Sean Hannity is complaining about it. I think it's reflected in their bottom line numbers. I think it is more comparable to when Glenn Beck left Fox News. Now watch. That you sort of reach a critical mass of advertisers that don't want to be associated with the program anymore. And as a result of that, the ad rates start to decline. The quality of the advertisers willing to advertise on that program goes down, and it no longer becomes commercially sustainable or viable. And I feel like we're at a very critical point there with Hannity, so just about reaching that place. So do you see the difference there? As he's talking about a narrative that they have created, and they're trying to spin this narrative, because the more they can spin this narrative, the more successful they're going to be in perpetrating this big fraud, this big lie, and making people think that Hannity is crashing, when in fact he's not crashing, and when in fact the real legitimate sponsors who aren't a part of this whole scheme will still be there. But this guy, you can clearly see when he's lying. And remember, this is a scam. This whole thing is a scam. They're scam artists. That's what subversive people are that work for the Communist Party. They dig up ways to and they hold on to these proven tactics that they can use over and over again that have been perfected throughout the years, and then they do it for the sheer purpose of blocking truth and for dividing a citizenry. That's how they subvert this whole country.
Liberal group, do you fear that if this works, Rachel Maddow's show and other liberal shows will be targeted?
I think that would be radically unfair, right? Because it isn't about his perspective or ideology. I think that Tucker Carlson is gross. I find his content odious, but
here he goes again. So now he's giving his opinion. He's looking down. He's also given the narrative out, so he's looking down. He's talking about how it would be unfair to get rid of, for the sponsors to back out of Rachel Maddow's show, but it would be fair for them to go away from Sean Hannity's show. And he's talking right now about how gross he thinks that Tucker Carlson is.
An advertiser campaign against him. Because I think part of this is that, and I would remind everybody that, you know, Media Matters isn't out there smashing Keurigs. And we're not calling for boycotts of these companies, mostly because it's not necessary. A lot of times all we have to do is talk to them and show them what it is that their advertisers are running alongside of, and they're making a business decision, and that business decision is to avoid Sean Hannity's volatility. And that was reflected in this weekend. They just don't want it. I mean, there are advertisers that left in August that...
See how he's smiling? He's got this little smile because he can't help but pleasure himself from this. But remember, this is a narrative lie, and that's why he's not looking. He knows that there are sponsors that are going to pull out, but these are people that I suspect already had connections with these people. They get them in there. They get them to sponsor them. They waste. George Soros has money to burn. So get in there. they give them some money, and then they pull them all out at the same time and make it look like this, like Media Matters is some big honorable company that goes, media company that goes and convinces sponsors to pull out for ethical and moral reasons. It's all completely a lie.
And when the Kurg thing flared up, came back to me and said, you were right.
Here's what Fox told me in a statement for this segment. They said, this intimidation effort is nothing more than political opportunism based on deceit. Sean Hannity hosts the #1 program in cable news because millions of Americans make the decision to join him every night. And the audience relationship is stronger than ever. So I think, Angelo, what they're saying there is, this is not a repeat of O'Reilly. We're not going to drop O'Reilly. We know the audience loves Hannity.
Well, they're not saying anything about his advertisers in that statement.
That's true. I have asked repeatedly
that's right.
if advertisers have withdrawn, and there's no comment from
And
Fox.
that's because, I mean, publicly we know that they are withdrawing, and I find,
no, we don't.
That Fox News thinks that I'm the one that's intimidating them based off of deceit, because that seems to be how it is that they function in the information landscape.
Well, let's take a look at how Hannity has been talking about you lately. I know this is uncomfortable to even put on screen, but let's show part of what Hannity had on the air this week. He continues to call you racist, anti-gay.
You can see all this on Twitter, by the way.
Anti-Semitic issues.
Sean, it's on Sean's page. You can go in and click on it, retweet it, and hashtag the CQRF.
Well, this in particular is rather hurtful because I am gay. And I have my
no stretch there.
And now husband. For a while we weren't allowed to get married. Of 14 years is Jewish. And so right on face, it's sort of a ridiculous sort of jab to sort of come at me, obviously on the most personal way. And we see that reflected all the time with not just Sean Hannity, but the right wing as a whole. They always go after people's strengths or characteristics. So that is, they think, a sore spot. I find it to be a reflection of who they are and how they think that's, I don't see that to be a valid criticism at all. Obviously, I'm not homophobic.
He was screaming at you on Twitter this morning. I wonder, has he ever tried to book you on Hannity?
No, he hasn't.
Because I would love to watch that. I really would.
We'll book him on this show if he wants to come on.
And if he would do it, and like Fox News has had in the past, every time they've offered to book anyone from us, they've never allowed it to be a live interview. And I think that reflects a lot about the way and shows Fox News' intentions. So no, he hasn't tried to do it.
Why would you?
He'll have on Roy Moore. He'll have on Bill O'Reilly even after he's fired from Fox News. I think at this point, though, we've crossed that threshold. I wouldn't want to appear on his program. I'm telling advertisers not to associate with Sean Hannity because of his volatility, his recklessness, his ability and willingness to go out there and undermine and attack women that speak out in this moment of all times.
So now he's going into the narrative again. And again, his eyes are going to when he's talking about as though Sean Hannity has attacked women. He has not attacked women. I know Linda, his producer. I know Sean. I listened to the episode where they were talking about Roy Moore, and what they said was exactly what I said, which is the difference between Roy Moore and let's say Al Franken is that Al Franken admitted to it. There's pictures of Al Franken doing it, and there's at least two women who are saying the same thing. One of the women is one of the women in the picture. Another woman has just come out and said that Al Franken thrust himself upon her, stuck his tongue in her mouth, and so on and so forth. Roy Moore is a strange and odd individual, I believe. At least that's the persona that he puts out on television. I think that, and I don't even know anything about his record. His record could be good, but I don't know as far as a conservative judge. When you look at his accuser, and I always find it very interesting when women come out at this particular time. However, I've said in the past, sometimes people are abused and they choose to come out and air their stories at a particular time because they're stronger. They've gotten past the traumatic experience and they don't want this individual to go forward. So I'm saying I don't know whether she is telling the truth or whether she's not telling the truth. I don't know if Roy Moore is telling the truth or whether he's not telling the truth. And this is a difficult thing. I talked about this all last week. We need to have standard procedures in place where when women get assaulted or raped or molested, even young kids, go get an envelope, write yourself a letter, sign it, date it, put it in the envelope and seal it and mail it to yourself and keep that so that if later on you want to come out about this, you can say, look, I had this way back then when this person was nobody. And I think this is this is what happened. See, that would that hold it in the court of law? I don't know. But by and large, unless you have sexually assaulted somebody, the statute of limitations would be out anyway, so there's nothing the court of law could do anyway. But in this case, the court of public opinion, if you had that letter, it could show that you have proof. That's the problem when we come 40 years later or 20 years later or 30 years later, when women come out with these things, is that it's hard. We live in a country of laws where you're innocent until proven guilty. Really, the truth is you're not guilty until proven guilty. That's the actual truth. But when women or anybody who's molested or raped or targeted comes out this many years later with no evidence, it's tough. It's a tough position for the court of public opinion to be in, because the court of law won't touch that. They can't make a decision based on this stuff if it was illegal in a court of law. Same thing with look at dirtbag Bill Cosby. I have no doubt in my mind that he did that to those women. But the fact that the women didn't have evidence and they didn't write a letter to themselves, or they didn't have people that were there with them that would testify on their behalf, is injuring their testimony. And the statute of limitations had passed, and Bill Cosby is going to walk away from this most likely. Because a court of law, you have to have proof in order to prove guilt. And sometimes that doesn't mean a DNA test, but it could mean eyewitnesses. It could mean witnesses from a while back, from back then when they told them this. That maybe in the case of I'm trying to remember who it was, and with the Vegas PD. Oh, with Sylvester Stallone, he's saying he didn't do anything to this underage 16-year-old girl. She actually did go to the police after it happened, and the police denied her. To me, that's evidence right there. That's evidence that she went to the police. And it's the police department's fault because they didn't do a rape kit on her, which they should have. That's a whole nother story. So basically, when we look at this guy right here, we look at David Brock, and we look at I didn't want to look at his face again. Freaking what's his name here? This Brian Stelter. You're looking at, like he said, the long game of how they systematically go about dismantling different shows in conservative media. It's all a part of a well-oiled, communist, subversive, democratic, leftist machine. Why don't you see this type of action from Fox News going after other people? Well, first and foremost, because they have morals and ethics. I think most conservative people have morals and ethics. But secondly, because conservatives are not organized like the left. Conservatives are true free thinkers. They live their own free lives. And when you look at the liberal left, you have the core group of people that are acting together in concert to do these nefarious things. And then you have other people, which I've had this repeated to me over and over and over again by people who are liberal, saying that I don't listen to conspiracy theories because I don't want to live paranoid or in fear. That's what they say. And so if they don't live in fear or in paranoia, I'm not saying go live in fear and paranoia, but if you don't have awareness, then you're not even going to look at some of these theories, and which means you're just going to believe what the left tells you and you're just going to move forward. And that happens all the time. Okay, so I think that's about it. Anybody got anything for me real quick? Let's see here. I have not been looking at my Twitter, and this H1029, she'll be blocked. I don't care what she thinks. All right, that's about it. Also, continue to boycott the NFL and anybody else who disrespects our vets, disrespects our country. It's very important, folks. Let me take a drink of coffee here. It's very important that we stand together. So the reason I came on tonight was because this stuff was fresh in my mind. I don't like what's going on. It's nefarious in nature. That guy is a weirdo. Media Matters is a hack organization ran by communist subversives who are in cahoots with the Democratic Party, with the leftists, those people that run these different educational institutions, with the deep state, all in the DOD and the Department of Justice and the FBI and everywhere else in the government. and state and local governments, in Congress, in the Senate, and all the judgeships across this country, it's a disaster. It is a disaster, folks. And Media Matters is just another loud group of subversive liars. That's it. I'm not going to do a Truth Zone tonight, but we'll be back tomorrow night, probably covering this a little bit more. Just remember, when you see this face, when you hear this voice, when you see these words, the truth has arrived. I'm Jonathan Gillum, and this is The Experts. I'll see you tomorrow, 8 p.m., more or less, Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget, tomorrow from 5 to 7, I'm going to be on Newsmax, co-hosting with my good buddy Bill Tucker. If you don't have Newsmax on your cable, you can watch it on newsmaxtv.com live, stream it. I'm going to be on NRA TV Tuesday at 9 a.m. I believe that's the time. I'll tell tomorrow for sure. And then I'll be hosting the Sean Hannity radio show from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving. If you're driving, tune in. I'll be talking to you. We'll be covering the book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. We'll be talking, we'll be talking about survival and about how to protect yourself. It's going to be a good show. It's always a good show when I host Sean's radio show because I work with such an incredible group of people there, and we get to mold a great show. It's going to be a lot like this. I'll see y'all tomorrow. The truth has arrived. Go order Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival right now if you haven't done it. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Everybody in your family should have a copy of this book you can take with you. If you're in college, you need a copy of it. If you're in law enforcement, you need a copy of it. If you're in government, you need a copy of it. If you're a husband or wife, you need a copy of it. Go get it. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. Amazon.com. Do it. Peace. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.